Hello, divas and dudes and friends of Powerhouse Bakery. I'm so excited to have you in my kitchen today for our nutrition class. This is going to be a really exciting series. I want you to think of it as sort of an overview of what do we mean by nutrition, what do we mean by healthy eating, and how is it going to matter to you? That is the most important part for me is when we look at a subject like nutrition, and remember it is a science, and a lot of people are practicing this science, which means when you practice something, you don't always hit the mark exactly. But when we are practicing nutrition, we want to make it applicable for you. We want to make it something that you can absolutely live with, and think of it too as a continuum. We're always looking for our best healthy. So as we go through this series, I want you to create your best foods list. And that's going to be what you create your menu from. So my role will be to give you lots of information to make that best foods list the very best it can be. We're going to talk about proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. We're also going to be talking about how do we create your ideal. How do we create your best foods that really help you be your healthiest you? If you've ever been to one of the classes here in the Powerhouse Bakery kitchen or in our front area, you know that when we talk about wellness and nutrition specifically, it really doesn't live all on its own. Wellness includes lots of things about how we choose to play out our day. So having a healthy lifestyle includes what we put on our plate. It also includes how we schedule our sleep time and our social interaction. It also includes our spiritual strength, our intellectual stimulation, and really how we put that whole ball of wax together, because we can't live with just what we eat. We have to live with what we do and what we choose to do with our time. So just know that as we go through this whole talk about nutrition and looking at the bits and parts and pieces of what we do in our plate really has a big overall umbrella that includes wellness. And so looking at all of those parts are really going to be the most important piece. But for our topic of nutrition science, let's get started. So make sure you have a pen and paper in hand, because I'm going to have you start to build your best foods list. So when I say best foods, I want you to think about foods that you love to eat. So I always say never eat a food you don't love. There's way too many fabulous foods out there to feel like you have to eat something just because it's healthy. I don't want you to do that. So it should be foods that you love. It should be foods that you are pretty okay with preparing, so easy to prepare. When we think about foods, we don't want to go overboard and think of having a lot of preparation to do if we've never spent time in the kitchen. Again, there's so many easy to access foods that don't take a lot of preparation that could absolutely fall into this category for you. So foods that you love, foods that are easy to prepare, maybe even too, foods that fit into your budget. And all of these categories are going to evolve, right? We're going to learn to love other foods. Our palate changes as we grow up, as we have new experiences with foods. That will change. Same with easy to prepare. As you learn recipes and hopefully get some ideas from Powerhouse Bakery, easy to prepare is going to change for you. And then our foods budget. As you start thinking about where your healthcare dollar is spent, food budget starts to change. But I promise you that eating healthy does not have to be expensive, and I'm going to teach you all about that. So as you're preparing your best foods list, I want it to be foods that you love, foods that are easy to prepare, and foods that fit into your budget. Also, we want to think about balance. When we start thinking about the macronutrients of our eating style, we want to think about balance. So all those pieces are going to go into what we talk about when we create your best foods list. So I want you to, on your piece of paper, to write 3 categories. We're going to talk specifically about protein, carbohydrates, and fats. So when you think about those big categories, I want you to really think about what foods are protein foods. So protein foods are going to typically be animal-based, but not always. So on your list, I want you to write down your 5 favorite protein foods, and they may or may not include animal products. So I'm going to help you a little bit. In my best foods list that are proteins, I know for sure we're going to think of fish and maybe poultry and of course beef. Now, how about the ones that are a little bit less common that are still going to be protein foods? If you don't want to eat any animal-based foods, what would we come up with? So we've got, think about it. Yes, legumes, beans, even whole grains. All can be a source of protein for our diet, especially if we're trying to cut out animal products. And we will talk a lot about how the media and the experts of nutrition are really making us make decisions about nutrition. But right now, I want it to all be about your best foods. And so you're going to write down foods that you really like that are going to provide your body with protein. And then the other category that we have is carbohydrates. So when you think about your favorite carbohydrate foods, which ones come to mind? You got it. It'll be things like bread, pasta, rice, and now the little more less obvious ones, beans. And yes, there is overlap, which is so important to realize that when we break foods down into their big categories, there's going to be a lot of foods that have enough carbohydrate and enough protein to count in either category. So that's something that I want us to really keep in mind. But again, for your best foods list, you get to decide what category you're going to put each of these foods in. So if you want to include beans as your carbohydrate, that's perfect. Now let's do a list of carbohydrates that are a little bit less obvious. And again, if you've been to any of my classes, you're going to know where I'm going with this. Anything that is plant-based is going to provide our body with carbohydrates. So when we think of plant-based, we know the potato and rice are obviously carbohydrates and they come from a plant. But what about the ones that are a little bit less obvious? Things like butternut squash or spinach. That's really interesting, right? You'd think, wait a minute, that's a green leafy. But it does provide our body with carbohydrates. So as we build our best foods list, I want you to start thinking about all the different foods from the plant kingdom that do in fact give our bodies carbohydrates. Next category, fats. Fats are the last of the 3 macronutrients. So be thinking about what foods you're going to put in your category that are fats. Yep, pretty easy. Oils, butter. What else? Maybe the ones that are a little less obvious, like the egg yolk. That is where the fat is in that egg. So you typically eat the whole egg. But if you're trying to cut fat, or if somebody has told you that you need to follow a low fat or low cholesterol diet, you might start using egg whites. So that's why the yolk is the fat source. Things that are maybe a little less obvious. That's when we start looking at nuts and seeds. And even some fruits are going to be very high in fats. Which one do you think that would be? Yep, avocado. So again, as you're making your best foods list, I want you to keep your list going as we go through all of these topics. And over the next couple of sessions, I want you to see how your list starts to add different foods and the other information around it. Because like I mentioned, we don't always think of our macronutrients as a single unit in a bubble, because of course that's not how we eat. The other thing that's really important is what influences our decisions. And so when we look at our best foods list, I want you to kind of see what items pop out to you as being the ones you know are healthy and you wrote them down because they are healthy, or the ones you wrote down because you like them. So if we visit that carbohydrate category again, I didn't add in fruits. Fruits are certainly going to be a way to get carbohydrates. It's what we call nature's candy because it's sweet. And so does that mean that it's a bad carbohydrate? Definitely not. But it's going to fall into that category. So again, on your best foods list, I want you to jot down some of your favorite fruits. Are they berries? Maybe apples? Maybe cherries? So getting your list of those carbohydrates are, again, important into your best foods list. So now let's change gears a little bit. You've got your best foods list started. And here I've got a wonderful variety of books that I'm using today to talk on. And they're important because the media is giving us lots of information on how we make our decision on what foods we choose to eat. So here's one by Andrew Weil, The Ultimate Guide of Food and Nutrition. And it's got a beautiful picture of fruits right on the front. We think of fruits typically as a health food, and they are. But sometimes we get confused because of the amount of sugar that's in that food. So as I go through these pages, what is influencing my decision? Well, the first thing is that it's bright and pretty. Second thing is it's got a doctor that has written this certain article in this magazine. So we are going to now decide, is this trustworthy information? We're going to decide if this applies to me. We're going to decide, do I have the symptom that's being discussed in this certain article? So I want you to be really aware of what factors influence your decision process in creating your best foods list. Because remember, that best foods list is going to be what you choose to shop with as you're going through H-E-B and other shops, making the foods that are available to you in your pantry. So I want us to really think about what makes our decision on foods. As we go through this little book, it's talking about preventing and easing chronic inflammation, a cornerstone of any healthy eating plan. In this section of the guide, you'll learn about major causes of inflammation and why chronic inflammation is increasingly being recognized as an important contributor to disease. So that's the other big part. If we are trying to avoid disease or we're trying to prevent a disease, what people talk to us about in the media has a big impact. Here's another one, 101 foods that could save your life. Pretty impactful, right? And again, we're going to look at who wrote it, what makes it important, and does it apply to me personally. So in the secondary header, it says, discover nuts that can help keep you thin, fruits and vegetables that can fight cancer and increase bone density, grains that keep cholesterol and blood glucose at optimal levels, fats that reduce blood pressure and boost brain health, and much more. Okay, so who's not going to want all of those factors? We all care about our health, and especially of ourselves and our loved ones too. And so this is a very provocative title of a book, and of course it makes you want to purchase it. Also notice that this book is written by a registered dietitian. The LDN stands for a licensed dietitian and nutritionist. So that's supposed to make us feel like, well, if they've gone through all the study to be a dietitian, then certainly their information should be valuable. But as we go through the book, does it really give useful information? Are the recipes that they provide easy to prepare? Are they cost effective and fit into your budget? Are they going to taste good? And are they going to fit into your palate? So all those are really important in making us decide if this is a valuable resource for us. And of course, we love pictures. And so this particular book does not have very many pictures. So it's really trying to appeal to the science side of your mind so that you want to read and understand all the scientific approach to what he's trying to tell us. And so through the next series of classes, I want to give you some resources and maybe even a new way of thinking to sift through some of the information and maybe even some misinformation that's out there in all of the media that's presented to us. Here's another one, weight matters. And another one, food matters. And of course, you know my business called Nutrition Matters. So again, we're looking at what's so telling in our industry today. People are so interested in how to control weight. We're so interested in conscious eating, how to help our environment. So now we're starting to really muddy the discussion, because if we're concerned about the world and the environment, that's one component of our decision process. But it's not really looking at the individual and how that nutrition is going to impact me personally versus impacting the world. So the food that we produce may or may not have a big impact on me personally, but of course it has an impact on our world as a whole. And the reason I bring this up is we don't want to confuse the issue. If we're trying to understand the value of making food selections based on helping our world be a safer place that has less pollution and it's kinder to animals, those are all really valuable. But that doesn't necessarily make it a clearer or easier decision when we decide what's healthy for our bodies. And of course the media, when they try to give us the information in these books, makes it a little more complicated. I have many people that want to eat a certain lifestyle. They want to eat vegan. And sometimes they eat it for health. They choose plant-based eating just for health. And sometimes people will choose it for the animal safety. They care about the animals so much that that becomes their primary decision factor rather than health. And so what I want to help you with in these next few meetings is to really understand, why am I choosing what I'm choosing? And does it have an impact on me? Does it have an impact on the world? And is that part of the decision process overall? Okay? So I'm going to show you one more book, and then we're going to get to a little bit more details. This is a beautiful book about the culinary Mexico. I love this one because it's got fabulous pictures. So this one is key to me because it brings in culture, and culture is so valuable. We here living in South Texas know a lot about the Mexican culture and the favorite foods that are part of this eating style. And so oftentimes I get people that are trying to decide how their culture will fit into healthy. And you know that when we're picking foods that we want to serve our family, there's a lot of opinion that goes into what should be on our table. And people are afraid of new foods. People are afraid of changing their favorite cultural heritage. And so what I also want us to do is, when you're working in your food list of your best foods list, protein, carbohydrates, and fats, I want you to think about where your culture fits into that. Because I promise you, we can make great foods that are culturally relevant that will still be healthy. And one of the things we do when we plan around making culturally relevant, healthy foods is we talk about two big categories. One is portion size. As you know, portion size is something I talk about a lot. As we go deeper into these courses, I'm going to really help you understand that the calorie balance equation is very important in determining what our bodies need and what is healthy overall. The other thing that's going to be really important is cooking style. Because when we cook a food, we add ingredients to it. So this is going to be where, when we are cooking our food, we are adding ingredients. We are adding nutrient quality. So if we cook some fresh broccoli, we are increasing or improving the cooking quality and the nutrient quality, because now we're liberating more of those nutrients than if we were to eat it raw. We are also potentially increasing the calorie level of foods, which might make that food not as healthy for us. If we deep fry a potato, we are cooking it in a certain style. You know where I'm going with this. If we deep fry a potato, what did we just turn it into? A French fry. So we start with this wonderful plant-based food that is loaded with fiber and minerals. It's a great source of complex carbohydrates. It even has a good hefty dose of amino acids. Great food, close to the earth, cheap, easy to prepare. And we add some oil. We add a lot of oil. We cut that potato, we peel that potato, we put it into the oil, and we now drastically change what qualities that potato originally had. We change its calories. We change its contents. So now a potato that is virtually fat-free is now pretty darn high in fat. So why do you think the potato and all its white counterparts that came from plants have received a bad rap in the last century or I'm sorry, in the last 10 years. Potatoes and the white starches come from plants. They are light in color, so we'll call them light. So other than the potato, we could also think of rice. They've gotten a bad rap, not because of how they are served in a culture, but because of the way they've been cooked. So what I really want to teach you is when we're deciding on our best foods list, I want you to have a couple of other sidebars that you use as a qualifier when you're creating your best foods list. I want you to think about how it's being cooked. I also want you to think about what foods are added to the cooking process. So, big headers on the side of your best foods list. We've got portion and we've got cooking style. Because I promise you that some foods are going to become healthier when we cook them, and some foods are going to be healthier when we add foods, i.e. other added oils or nuts or seeds. But for the most part, we want to be able to understand our best foods list separate and apart from the portions that change its nutrient quality as well as the cooking style. So we're going to separate that out just a little bit for you. Okay? So in the last couple minutes that I have, I'm going to give you one more tidbit for your best foods list. Let's create some ideas together. Here we go. Protein, carbs, and fats. Let's put down 5 best foods lists, and we're going to talk about these as we go. So we've decided that fish could be a great protein source. We decided that potato could be a great carbohydrate source. And we decided that butter could be a great protein, a fat source. Let's add one more. How about poultry? And rice. And olive oil. And 2 more, we're going to add beef. And we're going to add lentils. And let's add seeds. So as we start creating your best foods list, I want you to see how we start to evolve this, thinking about portion, about cooking style. Are they easy for you to prepare? Do they fit into a cultural relevant menu style or recipe style? And will your family be happy to go along this path with you? So we could use fish that is pan-fried, or we could use fish that is baked. We could use tuna fish, or we could use shrimp. Those are all great examples of that fish category. We could do poultry that is a boneless, skinless chicken breast, or we could use a whole roasting chicken, or we could use ground turkey meat and use it in a variety of different recipes. So that's how your best foods list is going to start taking on its own personality by putting in those specific foods. We could use beef that is a lean London broil that we've marinated and cut into strips and added to a salad. It doesn't have to be a big T-bone that sits right in the center of the plate like the typical American idea of a Western culture's perfect menu item. When we go to the carbohydrates, we could serve a sweet potato or a red potato or a purple potato. We could serve one that's got a lot of pulp versus skin, or we could choose a very small one that has a lot more skin versus pulp. We could choose a wild rice, or we could choose a jasmine rice, or a sticky rice. We could choose lentils that come in a soup, or we could choose lentils that are spiced up with curry. Great ways to think of lots of options for recipes and cultural diversity. When we think of butter, we could use organic butter, we could use vegan butter, we could use ghee that happens to be a dairy-free butter. When we think of olive oil, we could have an exclusive specialty olive oil, or we could have an olive oil blend. We could use one that's light in flavor or one that's rich in flavor, depending on how we choose it by its color. The wonderful world of seeds. We could add seeds to a salad, we could add seeds to a grain, or even to a fish as we dredge it and want to pan fry it. So lots of exciting things. So as you create your best foods list, bring your notebook every time we have our meetings on nutrition, because we're going to add a lot of things that I think are going to be a wonderful way for you to learn your very best healthy eating style. And remember, it doesn't have to be the same as mine or what we serve here at Powerhouse Bakery, but what I want you to try to do is always think about how you could make your best foods go from good to great every time you learn something new. So look forward to seeing you again soon.